As Katie mentioned, I'm Ryan Cooper, a GIS analyst with Raleigh Parks. And before I start, I want to just express how excited I was to see that work just a moment ago from Varvara, Jalen, and Ahan that they just presented. I'm no longer surprised by how thoroughly young people are engaging with the important topics of today, and specifically through GIS, but I'm always impressed by what I see from our young people, and I'm inspired. So thank you to all of you for that great work you just presented. So today I'm going to present about something that's less about my day-to-day work and more a minor personal obsession that I've had over the past few years. How can we directly access a Geojson file in ArcGIS Pro? Over the next few minutes, I'll breeze through some of the basic background about Geojson and the current state of Geojson access in ArcGIS Pro, and then after that, demonstrate how the node package Koop can be used to get us closer to direct Geojson access in Pro. So first things first, what is Geojson? Actually, let's talk about JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and it is a structured data format that stores data in name value or key value pairs. It is text-based and human readable, and even though JavaScript is in the name, multiple programming languages and applications are able to ingest and output JSON with ease. Most servers and APIs these days, including ArcGIS servers, send their responses as JSON, or at least have the option to do so. The diagram at the bottom of the slide attempts to demonstrate how a row of data in a table would translate into JSON. So a single row in a table would be a feature surrounded by curly braces. The value for each column is represented as a comma delimited name value pair between those curly braces. And for a multi-row data set like this example, each JSON object would be a member in some sort of container, such as an array or list. Geojson is itself JSON, but structured in a standardized way for storing vector geographic features and their associated attributes. Points, line strings, polygons, and their respective multi-type variants are all supported as geometries. By convention, GeoJSON files have the extension .geojson. And while GeoJSON is pretty verbose, it is both human readable and straightforward for machines to interact with, so it makes it, I don't know, in my opinion, a pretty cool format. But what's the state of GeoJSON in ArcGIS Pro? Currently, Pro does not support direct access of a GeoJSON file. You cannot simply drag and drop a GeoJSON file into an ArcGIS Pro map as you would like a shape file or feature class. The animation here demonstrates what direct support of GeoJSON looks like in, for example, QGIS versus the lack thereof in ArcGIS Pro, as you just saw a error pop up when that happened. Of note, Pro and ArcPy do provide the JSON to features tool, but this simply copies the features from the GeoJSON file into a new feature class. You're not accessing the GeoJSON file itself anymore, just a copy of it. So you're duplicating your data to be able to access that GeoJSON file. How do we fix this access issue then? And I'm going to say we can do it with Koop. So what's Koop? According to the developers of it, Koop is a JavaScript toolkit for connecting spatial APIs. It exposes a Node.js server that translates GeoJSON into the GeoServices specification supported by ArcGIS products. Essentially, Koop is able to read in data from a variety of sources, translate those data to GeoJSON, and then translate that GeoJSON into the same GeoServices format you typically access when you use like ArcGIS Online or Portal. And although it is a tool developed by Esri, it is free and open source software under the Apache license. Additionally, it has a plugin architecture to extend support for a wide variety of input data formats and sources, as well as output types such as WMS, WFS, and vector tiles. What I'll cover next then is how to set up Koop and configure a provider plugin for reading GeoJSON so we can then access a GeoJSON file as a feature service. So before you can use Koop, there are a few things you would have to have installed on your computer. So you would need Git, Node, and the Node Package Manager. And these are all, they're cross-platform and run on Windows, OS X, and Linux, or OS X. Once those are installed, you can use the Node Package Manager to install the Koop command line interface, or KoopCLI. And this is a useful tool for quickly creating a new Koop server. Once you've created that new Koop server with this tool, you can sort of configure away, which is exactly what we're going to do next. So let me get out of my slides here. And we'll go to the big screen here. All right, so what we would need to do to get started with Koop is open up a Node.js command prompt. This is something that comes if you're on Windows, would come installed with your Node installation. But if you're on OS 10 or Linux, you can just access this. You'd be able to access Node through your terminal. And I'm just going to start the install process and describe what's happening next. So this command I just put into the command line is saying it's accessing that KoopCLI tool that I described earlier. We're going to create a new app called Geojson Services, and it's going to put that app into my Koop directory. And you could put this anywhere, but I just happen to have all my Koop services in a folder on my computer called Koop. So it's pulling down all the configuration files and dependencies, I think from GitHub, and getting it all set up in this Geojson Services folder. And now it's installed, and if we open up this folder, everything that we need to create a server is good to go there. Next, we're going to get into our new server, that directory. And what we'll need to do is take advantage of that plugin architecture I described earlier to install a plugin that will allow us to access GeoJSON data. It's this provider file, GeoJSON. It's a plugin. So that's installing in our Geojson Services directory, and you don't really see much happen, but if you look at the screen, or all that text there, it means that it worked, which is great to see. You love to see it. So once that plugin is installed, we then need to tell Koop that, hey, when you start up, let's make sure that we know that that plugin needs to be included in sort of the server runtime. So I'm going to open up the configuration file for when you start up the Koop server. And I know if you're not familiar with JavaScript or Node, this may look scary, but we're just adding in a couple of lines of code here that I pulled off of the documentation page for this plugin. And basically what we're saying is when the server starts, look for the plugin and use the plugin when the server runs. So I'll save that configuration. We don't need to change anything else in this file. And then one last step we need to do is create a data directory. By default, the Geojson plugin is going to look for a directory called data in our server root directory of the server. So we'll make that directory real quick. It should pop up. There we go. We've got an empty data directory right here. We don't have any data in it, but we'll just pop some in real quick. I've got some dummy data that I'm going to throw in there, some points, lines, and polygons. And with that, we have our server configured. All we need to do is start it. So we can do that by using that Node package manager, npm start. And that's going to start the server, hopefully. Live demo, you never know what's going to happen. But it says it's listening at 8080, which means we're good to go. We're up and running. I've got Pro open here, and now we're ready to try to access this data. So when this Koop server is running, it's basically serving your data using the format you would use for like a feature service or a map service. So this line I've got copied right here is sort of the template URL style for accessing GeoJSON from that data folder. I'm going to copy this URL, and we're going to go to add data, data from path, paste that in. And the important thing to note here is the only thing you would need to change, depending if you wanted to change what file you're looking at, is this part right here where it says lines. This is going to make sure that I access the lines.geojson file in that data directory. But if I wanted to do polygons, I would replace this with polygons, or points would get the points data set. Anyway, I'm going to add that, and it's going to work. Hooray. And just one more example to show that that does indeed work. Go through that same process. And this will add the polygons data, as you can see. Polygons right there. And it adds the data to ArcGIS Pro. And we can open up the attribute table even and look at the attributes in there. So this is all just sort of a proof of concept, but you can now technically add GeoJSON directly to ArcGIS Pro, which I think is pretty cool. We can't really drag and drop like you could like in QGIS, but you could drag and drop a GeoJSON into that data directory and immediately be able to access it using the feature service URL that I just presented a second ago. So as I wrap up, I'll admit there may be a pretty narrow use case for all of this. Many may not mind converting GeoJSON into a new file with that JSON to features tool, and that's fine if you want to do that. However, GeoJSON is a popular spatial data format used by many outside of the GIS field, particularly in web development and a lot of civic technology folks who may not have access to Esri technology or be comfortable using it. While the format was originally designed to provide a standard JSON structure for retrieving spatial data from servers, it's proven to be a popular file-based data format for small data sets. And I hope someday direct support for GeoJSON will be available in Pro, but until then, Koop provides a nice workaround for dealing with what I think is a fun data format. So thanks y'all for your time, and if I have any time left, I'm happy to answer questions, and if you think of any later on, also happy to answer those offline.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, that was such a good presentation. It looks like you have one question. Does this attribute convert as well?
Not sure I understand the question.
Yeah.
Oh, chat. Does this attribute convert? If the question is like the attributes from the file come through, like is there an attribute table? If that's the case, yeah, like any attribute data that you have in your GeoJSON file will be accessible in the table. I know I kind of blasted through that real quick, but there's call one in the attribute field that was, can actually pull up the original GeoJSON real quick, maybe. Shoot. So I think I actually published this or created this data using something called geojson.io. And so all that data was actually created in here and then pulled down onto my local computer into that data folder. So I drew that polygon, and then let's see, that call one field has the data that I assigned to it. And that shows up also in the attribute table in Pro. And to Corey's question, if I can take 30 seconds to answer that, I think the answer is no. Do you know if Esri is going to roll this into a new deployment of Pro? This has been a question on GeoNet, or an idea to have GeoJSON support for 3 or 4 years, and there does not seem to be a lot of interest in making this available. I think that one of the issues, I'm speculating here, is that GeoJSON does not have an index, or you can't index it. It reads the whole file in, it has to parse the whole thing if you do a query. So it's very inefficient, and what I think Esri might be concerned about is people loading in a 2 gigabyte GeoJSON file and then complaining that it is really slow, which is just a limitation of the format. It's not meant to be used on large data sets. If you're using a 2 gigabyte GeoJSON, then you probably should convert it to a feature class or pop it into a spatial database or something. But it seems to me that there's no interest on their part to make this available, but I will always hold out hope, mostly because it's technically possible. It's been in QGIS as an option for several years now. So it's just a matter of will, I suppose.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan. Again, that was great.
Thank you.